My name is Scruton and I'm the Learning Development Tutor for ICJS. My role is to provide support for any and all students to help them develop their academic skills. In this presentation I'll be looking at some general good practice as you get started on your degree. The title for this presentation, Preparing for Submission, shows a focus on things to look out for and to keep on top of as assignment deadlines approach. So we start with this, the question. While a university course is about both broadening and deepening your understanding and learning around specific subject areas, the way this is often measured is in a student's ability to respond to various questions they are presented throughout the course. I present here a couple of visual reminders of things not to do. Do not crowbar things into an assessment that don't fit, in other words, that are not relevant. Connected to this, the assignments you will have to complete will never be asking you to write everything you know about a subject, throwing everything in the kitchen sink in. When writing up your first draft, it's okay to spread the net wide, but as you refine the writing, redraft and edit the work, one of the key questions you'll have to ask of each sentence is, so what? Is the content contributing to answering the essay's question? If not, you have to rewrite it so the relevance is clearer to the reader, or you have to lose it. The work that gets the high marks is where the student has recognized they are not writing 2,000 words about a subject, but writing a 2,000-word answer to a specific question. So the first point to keep in mind as you progress through this course is that the question is king. This will impact your approach to assessments from the earliest of stages, where you will be using university's Discovery search engine or even Google Scholar and identifying relevant keywords from the question to help you find the most relevant reading material. Linda Jones, our criminology librarian, is a key resource in developing your search skills. With regard to reading material, it is important to remember that in the majority of your units, the reading list available through Moodle is your first port of call for relevant reading materials. Moving on from the question, there are the practicalities of getting the work done and how you plan this. Let us consider this calendar with a deadline at the end of the month. You might set aside Saturday to analyze the question, followed by 2.5 weeks of reading. After this, you might take a day to structure your essay and then set aside 4 or 5 days to do the actual writing of the assignment. This might then be followed by a day of proofreading for you, and then another day where you gave the work to a friend to proofread, and then you submit. This might seem reasonable, but life gets in the way. For example, your son's birthday is on Saturday, and your parents are visiting the following day, so that's that weekend gone. You have a presentation at work at the end of next week, and you'll be working late on Wednesday and Thursday to prepare for that. The following Friday there are leaving drinks for an old work colleague, and then on Monday you've got to take your daughter to a school football match she's playing in the evening. The point here is that unreasonable schedules create unnecessary stress. If we consider this month leading up to the assignment deadline that takes account of the various other events going on, we can start to plan more sensibly. Starting from the end, we see the deadline on the 31st. That's immovable. The day before is allocated for getting a friend to proofread the work, but it's a little unfair to expect the friend to turn around a university essay in one day. They'll have their own things to be getting on with. So for safety's sake, let's give them 3 days to read the work, write comments, and get back to you. This is better. But you have left no time to respond to any issues your proofreader might have highlighted. So it's worth moving this back so you have a day to make changes based on their feedback. Now before you get someone else to proofread the work, you should be reading it yourself. This is generally a more involved process than most people allow for, and we will discuss this next, but suffice to say it will take longer than a day. And once again, time needs to be factored in for you to edit and redraft based on what your proofreading uncovers. So we now have a clearer idea of when the writing needs to start. It's important to remember that reading and writing don't happen separately from each other, but that it is in fact an iterative process whereby you might read a little over half of what you plan to read, and then you get started with writing to help you identify those areas where you have a knowledge gap, and more reading and research needs to occur. As you will see, the analysis of the question in this example is only happening a day earlier than in the previous example. And in fact, the number of days committed to doing this work is less than in the previous model, but accounting for real life, this month should be considerably less stressful, as you won't immediately feel that you're on the back foot and behind schedule. So the second big piece of advice here is schedule backwards and schedule sensibly. The next point to consider, and this is not necessarily something you'll be in a position to do until later in the academic year, is to consider previous feedback carefully. Many students feel that feedback they receive from one assignment can't have much of a bearing on other future assignments. This is very much not the case, and it's worth now covering in more detail the proofreading process and how assignment feedback feeds into this. So proofreading is the next big point I'll cover here, and let's start with this simple little graphic showing a cyclical process, or as I label it here, an iterative process. If you aren't sure what I mean by this, I'm describing proofreading as a number of processes, not a single event, but a number of events whereby the product keeps improving in each cycle. First of all, we want to be environmentally friendly where possible, and I'm aware that all your work will be submitted online. But I recommend printing off a completed draft of your work, as proofreading is often more effective when done on paper than on the screen. Now, a common myth that I hear many students telling themselves and each other is when they state categorically, "I'm just not very good at writing." Well, writing is a skill that needs practice like any other. The reality is that academic English is nobody's mother tongue, and we all had to work at it. For more on this, I highly recommend you search out Helen Sword's presentation on academic writing on YouTube. The proofreading approach I present in this video is based on a clearly defined checklist of points to look out for. Many students make the mistake of looking through their work once, perhaps twice, and then considering the work proofread. In reality, when you consider all the different things that need to be checked for, it becomes, or should become, quickly apparent that reading once or twice is not enough. So let's imagine you've printed off a complete draft and you want to take it a page at a time. We can perhaps start with the grammar. If you feel really confident, then you might want to include punctuation and spelling in this read-through, but if you're new to this, I wouldn't recommend it. The idea is that you would highlight or circle the issues as you scan through the text, looking specifically for these problems. I should make it clear that you aren't trying to fix these issues at this point, but simply highlighting where issues may or do occur. When it comes to grammar and spelling, many people have been lulled into a false sense of security because of the spelling and grammar checking on a computer word processor like Microsoft Word. These are good tools, but only when they're used correctly and when they're actually used. If you have red, green and blue lines throughout your text that are going unattended, then this is a problem. First of all, obvious mistakes aren't being corrected. But second of all, Word, for example, does not show all the issues at once. And if there are more errors than it feels comfortable with, it will simply not highlight all the errors. See this example here, where a number of green, blue, and red issues have not been fixed. However, as you can see here in this red circle, there are punctuation errors that are now being ignored. You would need to right-click on each of the issues and either fix or tell the computer to ignore it. Then you would need to save the document, close it and reopen it, at which point other previously unhighlighted errors would be presented. The next thing to look out for might be repetition. There are a number of types of repetition, but the most damaging to your assignment will be where whole points or ideas are being repeated, even if it's being done with different language each time. Looking through a text to see if you are in fact saying the same thing in different ways can be a key way to improve the quality of your submission. Many students can easily fall into the trap of forgetting that they are writing for an audience, the marker. This means the text needs to be reviewed for readability or reader-friendliness. For example, this sentence starts well, but it continues for far too long, and is likely going to lose the reader, who may have to read that sentence a number of times to understand the underlying ideas. The next point to consider is references and citations. The issue of references breaks into two distinct parts. Firstly, where the referencing and citing has been done incorrectly. This means looking through what's in your text and making sure it follows the rules outlined by the university. The second issue is to consider where referencing and citing simply hasn't been done. And we could also call this bold statements, or as Wikipedia calls them, weasel words. As you will see from these examples, weasel words are phrases a writer may use to provide support for a point they're making. This is necessary, but such support needs to stand up to scrutiny. Some people say, which people? Where's the citation? Many scholars state, which scholars? Where's the citation? It's believed, who believes? Where's the citation? Many are of the opinion, how do you know? Where's your evidence? Where's the citation? So the key to looking out for this problem is reviewing your text, identifying any sentences that don't currently have citations, and then considering them carefully, and whether they have information in them that needs support from external sources. It's not an exact science, and it'll take a little while for you to get comfortable with this, so in the meantime, err on the side of caution, and if you're not sure if it needs a citation or not, put one in to be on the safe side. Another point connected to readability is what I've labelled here as ambiguous referential language, but what can more simply be called pronouns. It, this, these, those, them, their. Small words that we use all the time, and certainly academic writing has no problem with them, providing they are used correctly. Here's an example of where they are not. The House of Commons Home Affairs Committee began an inquiry in 2014 regarding the conduct of several constabularies, while the National Crime Agency has also been tasked with an independent investigation. Their findings have not yet been released. Can you see the problem? The reader could very well be left unsure as to whose findings are yet to be released. This ambiguity and vagueness in academic writing is a guaranteed way of frustrating your marker and limiting your final mark. It's also worth looking out for inappropriate personal language. I, you, we. Academic writing standards at undergraduate level generally encourage you not to use this sort of language unless writing a reflective account, which I won't go into here. So, once again, there are exceptions and it will take time to develop your own style, but at the moment, when in doubt, steer clear of personal pronouns and first-person references to yourself. Thankfully, in this example, there aren't any problems. The final point to consider when reviewing a draft is the question I outlined earlier. So what? Moving on to the last thing to consider before submitting, presentation, let's consider this picture. Both of these houses will be more or less identical structurally in terms of the number of rooms, the location, the cost of rates, etc. In most measurable senses, these houses are identical. But which would you prefer to have? Presentation matters because, and forgive the cliché, first impressions matter. It's the reason that we tidy our homes when we want to sell them. Potential buyers don't care about your furniture, but it will put them off if the place is a mess. In essays and academic reports, this translates to making sure the formatting is correct and reader-friendly. This includes page numbers, anonymization of the submission, so don't put your name anywhere on a piece of work you're going to submit, just your student number. Accurate and consistent referencing, sufficient space to avoid a wall of text, where as many words as possible are packed into a single page, and proofreading for all the stuff previously mentioned. In academic posters, should you do them, you should try to use only clear, high-quality pictures. Try to be as concise as possible and make sure the text is easy to read. Again, use accurate referencing. And make sure whatever colour scheme you choose is reader-friendly. No red text on a grey background, for example. And once again, all that proofreading I previously mentioned. I'll conclude by saying that the university can offer lots of support. Your colleagues on the course can offer lots of support. If you're struggling, then keep us in mind. Stay in touch with us and each other. Thank you.